Austin or Texas. The warm afternoon breeze crossed the busy streets as Clara Rodriguez organized cages and aquariums in the Feathers and Friends pet store, her second home for the last 5 years. The atmosphere was always filled with the sound of birdsong and rustling wings. But that afternoon, something was different. Clara felt a slight discomfort, a sensation that was hard to explain. "Watch out for the girl." "Quick!" shouted Charlie, the Ecletus parrot, interrupting her thoughts. Clara stopped immediately, her heart racing. "Charlie!" she called out, turning to face him. He looked at her with his lively eyes, tilting his head slightly as he repeated, "Watch out for the girl. Quickly! Where'd you get that from, eh, boy?" Clara asked, trying to laugh it off. Charlie, normally playful and full of funny phrases, had never sounded so serious. She went back to organizing a nearby shelf, but was now alert. From time to time, Charlie's shouts echoed through the store, becoming more and more insistent. "Watch out for the girl! Quick!" Clara felt a pang of concern. She approached the large front window and instinctively looked out into the parking lot. There, an old, worn-out car was parked, something that wasn't exactly unusual, but the vehicle had been there since the morning. Stranger still, a man with disheveled hair was circling near the vehicle, looking around as if he were on the prowl. "What a thing," murmured Clara, squinting to get a better look. Charlie shouted again, this time with an almost desperate tone. "Watch out for the girl! Quick!" "Calm down, Charlie, I hear you!" Clara exclaimed, her voice laced with nervousness. Turning to face the parking lot, she saw the man leaning over the car, checking something in the trunk before looking around furtively. Her heart raced. Something was wrong, but she didn't know exactly what. Charlie kept calling, as if trying to convince her that the danger was real. "Is this crazy? Am I becoming paranoid because of a parrot?" Clara tried to convince herself that it was just a coincidence, but her anxiety was greater. The man walked to the driver's door, opened it, and got into the car. But he didn't leave. He stood there, motionless, while Clara watched from behind the glass. Suddenly, Charlie let out an even louder, piercing scream. "Look out! Now!" Clara felt a shiver run up her spine. Her hands began to shake, and fear mixed with intuition told her it was no coincidence. "Okay, Charlie, I hear you. I hear you," whispered Clara, picking up her cell phone and keeping her eyes fixed on the scene outside. Charlie, on his perch, was fluttering his wings as if trying to drive danger out of the place. His behavior was so unusual that Clara could no longer ignore it. Looking at the car again, she noticed something. There was a slight, almost imperceptible movement in the rear window. It wasn't a reflection. Someone or something was inside. Clara took a step back, the air heavy in her lungs. She knew she had to do something. Charlie seemed to have realized the danger even before she had, and now she had to find out what was going on. Clara took a deep breath and decided to act. If she was wrong, it would just be a misunderstanding. But if she wasn't, the thought made her shudder. Charlie continued to shout disturbingly as she put on her coat and picked up her cell phone. "Stay here, Charlie. I'll be right back," she muttered, casting one last glance at the parrot, who seemed even more agitated. As she left the store, Clara felt the warm Texan sun hit her face. She walked slowly towards the car, trying not to attract the man's attention. He was still sitting in the driver's seat, apparently distracted, but Clara could feel his eyes scanning his surroundings every few seconds. As he approached, Clara pretended to be just passing by. However, as she reached the side of the car, she heard something that froze her blood, a muffled sound, almost like a sob. She stopped immediately, her heart racing. The sound was coming from the trunk. There was no doubt about it. It was a cry. She turned sharply and pretended to tie her shoelaces to give herself more time to look at the car. Inside, the man began fiddling with the dashboard, looking impatient. Clara realized that he was about to leave, and her window of opportunity was closing fast. Her hands shaking, Clara pulled away and called the police. "Emergency! What's your location?" asked the attendant in a calm voice. "I'm at Feathers and Friends, a pet store on Broadway Avenue in Austin. There's been a man parked here for hours, and I think there's someone trapped in the trunk. I heard a cry coming from there," Clara explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "The police are on their way. Please stay safe and don't confront the suspect," the attendant replied. Clara took a step back, still holding her cell phone, and pretended to answer a call while watching the car. The man in the driver's seat looked in her direction for a moment, his eyes meeting hers. Clara's stomach churned, but she kept her composure. He looked away and started rummaging through something on the passenger seat. Clara knew she had to get away before he got suspicious. Walking back to the store, she felt a shiver run down her spine when she heard Charlie shouting again. "Get help! Get help!" She quickly went inside and locked the door. Inside, the store seemed like a refuge, but Clara couldn't get out of her head what she had heard in the parking lot. "The police are coming, Charlie. Calm down, kid. They'll sort it out," she said, more to herself than to the parrot. Outside, Clara saw the man get out of the car and open the trunk, hiding the contents with his body. She couldn't see exactly what he was doing, but the muffled crying stopped for a moment. Seconds later, he slammed the trunk shut and climbed back into the driver's seat. Clara looked anxiously down the street, searching for the sound of sirens. Minutes that seemed like hours passed, until 2 police cars arrived with their lights flashing. Clara felt a wave of relief mixed with nervousness. One of the policemen got out of the car and approached her. "Are you the one who called?" he asked in a professional tone. "Yes, it's that car over there. I heard a cry coming from the trunk and the man looks nervous. He's inside the car now," Clara replied, pointing. The policeman nodded and motioned for his colleagues to approach the vehicle. Clara held her breath as she watched the scene. "Austin police! Open the door and get out of the vehicle," shouted one of the officers. The man hesitated for a moment, but finally opened the door and raised his hands. One of the officers searched him, while another went to the trunk. Clara was static, every fiber of her body tense as she waited for what would come next. As the policeman opened the trunk, a muffled scream echoed, and Clara saw a small figure being pulled out. It was a little girl, tears streaming down her face, her eyes wide with terror. Charlie, inside the store, let out another scream, this time clear as day. "Look out for the girl! Save her!" Clara fell to her knees, her emotions finally overwhelming her as the reality of what had happened unfolded before her. The policeman quickly pulled the girl out of the trunk. She was visibly shaken, her hair messy, and her face red from crying. Clara watched everything from the store window, one hand pressed against the glass, her heart racing. "Is someone with you, darling?" asked a policewoman, crouching down so that she was at the girl's height. The child couldn't answer immediately. She just shook her head negatively as she sobbed. A sense of relief mixed with anger grew in Clara. Relief that the girl was alive, but anger at what might have happened if Charlie hadn't warned her. Outside, the suspicious man screamed as he was handcuffed. "I didn't do anything! This is a mistake! There's no proof," he said, trying to break free, but the officers held him firm. One of the officers approached the girl carefully. "It's all right now. You're safe. Can you tell us your name?" he asked in a gentle tone. The girl wiped her tears with the back of her hand and answered in a trembling voice. "Sarah. My name is Sarah." Clara felt her eyes water. "Sarah," she repeated mentally, recording that name. She knew that this child would never leave her memory. Charlie, inside the store, continued to draw her attention with phrases that sounded like pieces of a puzzle. "Don't trust him! Close the door!" The policewoman standing next to Sarah frowned as she heard the parrot's cries coming from the store. Clara, realizing this, rushed out to explain, "Sorry, that's Charlie. He's my parrot. He was the one who made me notice the car and hear the sounds," she said, pointing at the parrot, which was still fluttering its wings in the store. The officer looked puzzled. "Did he recognize anything before you did?" Clara nodded. "Yes," he started shouting urgently. something he never does. When I looked, I saw the car and the man, and then I heard the crying. The policeman looked at the detained man, who was now silent, and his face was tense. It seems your parrot may have heard more than we realize. Another policeman opened the suspect's car and started searching. It wasn't long before he shouted, "We've got something here." All eyes turned to the vehicle. From it, he pulled out a bag full of ropes, adhesive tape, and other items that clearly didn't belong to an ordinary person. Clara felt her stomach turn as she imagined what the man was planning to do to Sarah. In addition, they found a cell phone containing messages exchanged with other individuals. The messages detailed routes and mentioned other meetings that the suspect had planned. "This is much bigger than it looks," muttered one of the officers, looking at the cell phone. The policewoman who was with Sarah approached Clara. "You saved that girl! And it looks like you've prevented something even more serious." Clara looked at Sarah, who was now holding a bottle of water given to her by one of the officers. Her eyes were still wide, but there was a glimmer of relief. "It wasn't just me. Charlie saw the danger before I did. He's the real hero here," replied Clara, with a shy but sincere smile. The girl finally looked at Clara and hesitantly murmured, "Thank you." Clara swallowed, feeling a wave of emotion at hearing those words. "You're safe now, Sarah. Everything is going to be fine." As the man was taken to the car, Charlie let out another sentence. "Get help. In the next truck." The officers looked at each other, now puzzled. "In the next truck?" repeated one of them. He might have heard something. Perhaps the man mentioned something while he was nearby, suggested Clara. The officer nodded. "Let's check it out. It's best not to rule out any leads." While the police began to connect the pieces, Clara went back inside the store. Charlie had finally calmed down, but he was still looking at her with an almost knowing expression, as if he knew he had saved a life. She approached him, gently stroking his shiny feathers. "Thank you, Charlie. You're amazing." The parrot tilted its head and let out one last sentence, in a tone that sounded almost comforting. "All right now. Safe." Clara felt a lump in her throat. Charlie was right. Sarah was safe. The pet store was quiet that night, but Clara's mind was in constant motion. What else could Charlie have heard? The phrase, "in the next truck," echoed in her head like a warning bell. The parrot seemed to know more than anyone else. The next day, Clara decided to visit the police station. She needed to share everything she knew about Charlie's behavior and what he had said. When she arrived, she was greeted by the policewoman who had rescued Sarah. "Clara, I'm so glad you came. We need to talk." The policewoman's tone was serious, but there was a glint of curiosity in her eyes. Clara nodded, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "Charlie keeps saying things. First it was, 'Watch out for the girl.' Then, 'In the next truck.' I think he may have heard the man planning something." The policewoman motioned for her to follow her to a small back room. There, the sheriff and two other investigators were examining a large screen displaying the messages taken from the suspect's cell phone. "Clara, it's good to have you here. We're trying to understand what exactly he was planning. We found messages about other encounters and vague references to routes," explained the sheriff. Clara approached, looking at the screen. "Does 'in the next truck' have anything to do with it?" she asked. One of the investigators frowned. "It's possible. We found evidence that the suspect was part of a larger group. These encounters could be the movement of more victims." Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. If Charlie was right, there could be other people in danger. Suddenly, the sheriff turned to her. "Has Charlie repeated anything since yesterday?" Clara thought for a moment. Not exactly. He's still agitated. But the last thing he said was, "in the next truck." The sheriff exchanged a meaningful look with the other officers. "We need to act fast." He pointed at the screen. One of the messages mentions a loading area near the state highway. It's possible that they're using trucks to transport victims. Clara's eyes widened. "Do you think he might be talking about another kidnapping?" "It's a possibility. Let's check it out." The sheriff got on the radio and started organizing an operation to investigate the area mentioned in the messages. Meanwhile, Clara returned home. Charlie was perched on his favorite spot, but he seemed restless. As soon as she entered, he tilted his head and repeated, almost in a whisper, "In the next truck. They'll take them." Clara froze. "What? Charlie, what did you say? Charlie, what did you say?" The parrot repeated, this time louder. "On the next truck. They'll take them away." Clara felt her stomach turn. She immediately called the policewoman who had helped Sarah. He said something new. He said they're going to take someone away in the next truck. The policewoman paused. "That confirms what we suspected. Clara, are you safe there?" "Yes, I'm at home with Charlie. He keeps saying these things. What have you found out?" "We're setting up an operation to intercept the trucks. The messages on the cell phone indicate that a delivery would be made tonight. It seems that Charlie is giving us confirmation that we're on the right track." Clara took a deep breath. "This has to stop. I can't stop thinking about what could have happened to Sarah." The policewoman replied firmly. "Let's get these monsters. And it looks like your parrot is helping us more than we could have imagined." Hours later, as the police surrounded the loading area on the highway, Clara was at home, anxious. She turned on the television, but couldn't concentrate on anything. Charlie, from his perch, looked equally tense. Suddenly, he let out a sentence that made her heart stop. "They're here! Close the door!" Clara ran to lock the door and turn off the lights. She didn't know if Charlie was speaking literally or just repeating something she'd heard before. But panic seized her. The phone rang, making her jump. It was the police officer. "Clara, we've managed to intercept a truck. There are people inside. Several." Her intuition and Charlie's help were crucial. Tears streamed down Clara's face as she looked at Charlie, who was now quiet, almost as if he knew that the danger had passed. "Thank you. Thank you for trusting us," said the policewoman before hanging up. Clara approached Charlie, who was watching her with bright, attentive eyes. "You're a hero, Charlie. You saved so many lives today." The parrot tilted his head and replied calmly, "All right now. Save. If you wish, I can continue with part 5. Conclusion, where Charlie and Clara are recognized as heroes by the community and the story reaches its exciting conclusion. The next morning brought a new feeling to the city of Austin. Clara woke up early, exhausted by the emotions of the previous day, but with a strange sense of relief. When she arrived at the Feathers and Friends store, she found a small crowd gathered outside. Police officers, journalists, and onlookers surrounded the place. "What's going on?" asked Clara, making her way through the crowd. One of the policemen, the same officer who had rescued Sarah, approached with a smile. "Clara, the operation was a success thanks to you, and Charlie, we saved 9 people who were about to be transported to another state." Clara put her hands to her mouth, trying to hold back the tears. 9. Oh my God. "Yes, and they're all safe now. But we want you to know that your role was essential. Without you and Charlie, we might not have been able to act in time." As the policewoman spoke, Charlie let out a loud sentence, as if he wanted to be part of the conversation. "Hero! Save the girl!" The crowd turned to the parrot, who was now swinging proudly on his perch. Laughter and applause echoed, breaking the tension of the moment. A reporter, holding a microphone, approached Clara. "Clara, could you tell us what happened? How your kite managed to help save these lives?" Clara took a deep breath, still trying to organize her thoughts. "Charlie is special. He's always been sensitive to his surroundings, but this time it was different. He realized the danger before I even understood what was happening. He started shouting, repeating phrases that made me pay attention to what was wrong. He was the one who made me call the police." The reporter smiled, delighted with the story. "So can we say that Charlie is a hero?" Clara looked at the parrot, who was now tilting his head as if he knew he was the center of attention. "There's no doubt about it. He's a hero," she replied, thrilled. Charlie replied, almost as if it had been rehearsed. "All right now. Save." The applause from the crowd increased, and Clara felt a surge of pride for her feathered friend. A few days later, the Feathers and Friends store was different. Clara had turned the place into an awareness center about child safety and human trafficking. There were information posters, scheduled talks, and a small area dedicated to telling Charlie's story. One of the first visitors was Sarah, accompanied by her parents. The little girl seemed calmer, but still shy. When she saw Charlie, she gave him a shy smile. "Can I say thank you?" she asked, looking at Clara. "Of course, dear." "I'm sure he'd love to hear that," replied Clara, taking Sarah by the hand and leading her over to the parrot. Charlie tilted his head, watching the girl curiously. Sarah came closer and said softly, "Thank you for saving me." As if he understood perfectly, Charlie replied, "All right now. Save me." Sarah's parents couldn't hold back their tears. "We can't thank you enough for what you've done, Clara. And that parrot, he's unbelievable." Clara smiled, stroking Charlie's head. "He's more than a parrot. He's a friend." That evening, Clara reflected on the last few days as she closed the store. She would never have imagined that a single day's work could transform so many lives. Charlie, perched on his seat, watched her with an almost human gaze. "You've changed everything. You know that," said Clara, looking up at him. The parrot replied with his favorite phrase, "All right now." "Saved," Clara laughed, wiping away a tear. "Yes, Charlie. It's all right now." And for the first time in a long time, she felt that everything really was all right. Weeks later, Clara and Charlie's story was still making headlines on the local news and even on some national broadcasters. People from all over the country were sending letters, emails, and messages to Feathers and Friends, praising the parrot's heroic act and Clara's courage. That day, Clara was organizing the mail when an unexpected visitor arrived. The sheriff in charge of the operation and Sarah, accompanied by her parents. They were accompanied by representatives from the town hall. "Clara, can I have a minute?" asked the sheriff, and with a smile on his face. Clara put down her cards and approached him. "Yes, of course. What happened?" Sarah held a small golden plaque in her hands, while the sheriff took a document out of his briefcase. "Well, we think it's time to officially recognize your impact." He handed the document to Clara. "The city of Austin wishes to declare this space, Feathers and Friends, as a place dedicated to safety awareness and as a symbol of hope." Clara read the certificate carefully, her hands shaking. It read, "In honor of the heroism of Clara Rodriguez and her parrot Charlie for saving lives and inspiring the community." I don't even know what to say," murmured Clara, feeling the tears build up. Sarah shyly handed Clara the plaque. "This is for Charlie. He's the hero, right?" Clara laughed, wiping away a tear. "Yes, he is." The representatives from the town hall placed the plaque at the entrance to the store, with Charlie's name engraved in gold letters. Outside, a small crowd gathered to watch the moment, applauding as the plaque was fixed. Charlie, perched in his favorite spot, seemed to know that this was all for him. He looked out at the crowd and, as if he knew exactly what to say, shouted, "All right now! Salva!" Laughter and applause echoed through the street as Clara proudly stroked the parrot's head. That evening, after the ceremony, Clara sat in a chair near Charlie's cage. She was exhausted, but at peace. "They put your name on a plaque. Do you have any idea what you've done?" she said, smiling at the parrot. Charlie tilted his head, as if thinking, and replied calmly, "Hero. Saved." Clara laughed out loud, feeling the weight of the last few days finally disappear. "Yeah, you're right. You are a hero." Looking out of the store window at the starry sky, Clara knew that this experience had not only changed Sarah's and other victims' lives, but also her own. Feathers and Friends wasn't just a pet store. Now, it was a place of hope, a reminder that even the simplest gestures, or the most unexpected cries, could save lives. As the city lights began to fade, Charlie rocked gently on his perch, repeating his favorite phrase like a lullaby to Clara. "All right now. save, and for the first time since it all began, Clara closed her eyes and slept soundly, knowing that the world was a little better thanks to her feathered friend by her side.